This is my very dear friend, Mike. Some time ago, he had quite an interesting experience. It was a hot summer's day and Mike wanted to refresh himself with some ice cream. So he walked to the nearest shop to get some. These were the flavors he could choose from: chocolate, strawberry, and vanilla. Just the basic options. Mike didn't care that there wasn't much choice. Without much hesitation, he picked the strawberry flavor because he wanted a refreshing, fruity taste. The ice cream tasted alright, but was nothing special. However, Mike was still quite satisfied with his choice. A week later, Mike was craving ice cream again. This time he went to another shop where they had a lot more options to choose from, which was great. More choice meant that he could more accurately pick the flavor he preferred, one that he would enjoy more and would hopefully be perfect for him. However, the choice wasn't as simple this time. Mike didn't really know which one he would like the most, so he had to analyze and compare all the options. It took him several minutes to choose the flavor, and in the end, he decided to go with strawberry again because it was a safe bet. The taste was okay, but nothing to write home about, similarly to the ice cream from the first shop. However, this time, Mike wasn't happy with his choice. His disappointment was immeasurable, and his day was ruined. I'm going to illustrate why this happened with this graph. The y-axis represents happiness, and the x-axis represents the amount of choice. You can clearly see that when we have very little choice, or perhaps even no choice, we are very likely to be unhappy. And it makes perfect sense why. For example, if you want a job but there aren't any available or only one place is hiring, you're not going to feel great. Instead, you're going to feel hopeless because you aren't able to choose something better suited for you. But as you gain more options and you have the ability to choose between them, your happiness increases, which also makes perfect sense. You don't have to work somewhere where you don't want to. Instead, you have the ability to pick whatever suits you best. So obviously, having choice is good. But what's interesting is as you get more and more options, your happiness doesn't keep increasing. Instead, counterintuitively, it decreases. In fact, having too many options to choose from can be just as bad as having no options. Which is kinda weird, since more choice should allow us to get precisely what we want. But rather than liberating us and making us happier, having a lot of options does the opposite. Psychologist Barry Schwartz coined this phenomenon the paradox of choice, because more becomes less. One of the reasons why more choice can be detrimental is because it raises our expectations. And usually it's to an absurdly high level where nothing is good enough anymore. When Mike was at the first ice cream shop, he didn't expect to find the perfect taste since the choice was obviously very limited. Therefore, his expectations weren't as high and the ice cream taste even slightly exceeded them. But in the second shop, where there were 100 different options, his expectations were much higher. Surely one of those 100 flavors should be perfect for his taste buds. But the ice cream only tasted alright, which is far below perfect. So Mike felt like he chose poorly, even though the ice cream tasted pretty much the same as in the first shop. And that's the problem. When there are more options, you're more likely to be dissatisfied with whatever you pick, compared to when you pick the same thing just from less options. Of course, choosing an ice cream is a harmless example, but the same thing happens when we're faced with choices in other more important areas. One good example is dating. You can now simply unlock your phone, open an app, and start swiping between potential partners. A few decades ago, we didn't have this possibility. Instead, we were usually limited to our small social circle, which meant we would date someone who was obviously not perfect. But now we basically have access to the entire world. And with so many fish in the sea, why would we settle for anything less than perfect if perfection could be just one swipe away? This results in unrealistic standards and therefore less satisfaction from our choice. However, this tends to lead to another problem. Some people, to avoid regretting their decision, end up not choosing at all. This is also known as analysis paralysis. When we're given a lot of choice and we're not sure what the best one would be for us, we tend to freeze up. And the more variables there are, the more likely we are to put off our decision. When Mike was choosing his ice cream, he was only looking for the best taste. And it's a good thing he was. Had he used other variables in his analysis as well, such as the price of the ice cream or how healthy the ingredients were, choosing would have become legit work. And if you've ever had to do something that required you to compare a lot of different information, you know exactly what I mean. For example, choosing what home to buy or rent. You have to compare the size of the space, the price point, the location, the interior, the infrastructure around it, and so on and so forth. And the more variables you're comparing, the more likely you are to feel so overwhelmed that you end up avoiding the whole thing for as long as you can. And this sort of paralysis is really common with people who want to have the best for themselves. But what happens is that they end up not buying a home because they have to check a few more houses since another one might be better. They also end up not reading any books because they can't tell which ones would be perfect for them. They don't bother exercising because they aren't sure which exercise plan is the best. And they don't invest their money because they don't know which assets are going to give them the biggest returns. Instead, they spend their time analyzing all the options, looking for the best, and not choosing any of them, which is more often than not the worst decision. Also, the problem is that quote-unquote the best doesn't really exist. The reality is that we'll always have to make some sort of a trade-off. For example, if you decide to buy car A, you might miss out on some benefits that car B brings, like extra storage or more legroom. And if you buy car B, you might have to settle for a more plain-looking aesthetic. Only rarely is one option clearly better in every aspect than the rest of them. Most of the time, each option has both advantages and disadvantages. This is why it's good to know what qualities are important to you. If all you want is comfort while driving or less gas usage, then you're not going to pay as much attention to a car that looks good but doesn't provide those benefits. And having these kinds of clear-cut priorities will actually help you negate analysis paralysis. So far, I've only been talking about how having a lot of options is detrimental. But in some circumstances, excess choice isn't as bad, particularly with people who have very strong preferences or with professionals in a given field. For those people, more choice won't make them unhappy or paralyzed. Instead, they'll just be able to ignore the unwanted options because they have the experience and thus know exactly what they're looking for. For example, when I go shopping for a t-shirt, the paradox of choice has no effect on me because I know exactly what my preferences are. I'm looking for a shirt that's black or gray, that fits me well, and has no logos on it. Because I have set these standards, I'm able to simply ignore every other t-shirt that doesn't fit the mold. The problem would be if I didn't know what I was looking for, or if I didn't know which qualities I should be paying the most attention to. In that case, extra choice would be detrimental. A lot of restaurants have already picked up on this paradox, and they help you choose by offering 2 menus. On one menu, there's 100 different options for people who know what they want. But on the other, there's like 5 daily dishes they're serving that day. The second menu brings the amount of dishes from 100 to just 5. And this makes the choice much easier for someone who doesn't have the energy to choose and just wants a simple meal. By now you probably understand pretty well how the amount of choice can impact us. When we only have a few options, there's a high chance that none of them will be good for us and we'll feel unhappy. But when we're faced with too many of them, we'll probably have to tackle with paralysis and dissatisfaction with our decision. However, just being aware of the paradox of choice can help you minimize it. Or at the very least, when it does happen, you understand why. If you want to learn more about this topic, then I suggest you check out Barry Schwartz's book, The Paradox of Choice. The book goes into much more detail and I highly recommend it. Anyway, thank you for making the tough decision and watching this video. I'm sure you had a lot of other great options to choose from. Hopefully it reached your expectations, helped you learn something new today, and of course, made you better than yesterday.